Okay, well, in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure we'll have a few more folks join us as we get rolling here, but we do want to go ahead and get started. We want to welcome all of you here to our research webinar series hosted by the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute. The goal of our institute is to expand Michigan's capacity to support new learning models, engage in active research to inform new policies in online and blended learning, and strengthen the state's infrastructures for sharing best practices. MVLRI is a division of MVU, or the Michigan Virtual University, which is a nonprofit organization whose mission is advancing K-12 education through digital learning, research, innovation, policy, and partnerships. MVU is also the parent company of Michigan Virtual School, a supplemental state-sponsored virtual school, Michigan LearnPort, an online professional development portal for K-12 educators and personnel, as well as MyBlend, a blended learning initiative providing K-12 schools with resources, products, and services to personalize learning options for their students and improve student achievement. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started today. This webinar will be recorded and shared publicly. Consequently, anything shared during this webinar, including our chat comments, could be shared publicly. This webinar may represent a presenter's or an attendee's personal views, opinions, conclusions, and other information which do not necessarily reflect those of MVU and/or the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute and are not given nor endorsed by MVU/MVLRI unless otherwise specified. Before we get going today, I just want to take a brief moment to introduce our presenters and thank them for presenting on our platform here today. We have with us first Rachel Schechter, who is the Director of Research at Lexia Learning. She holds a doctorate in child development from Tufts University and a master's in education from Harvard. Rachel has been practicing program evaluation and educational interventions for nearly 10 years, mostly examining the use of technology to enhance and accelerate student learning outcomes. Our co-presenter today is Alexis Treat, who is the Senior Manager of Instructional Materials at Lexia. She works on the development of student activities and materials for Lexia products, as well as resources to help support teachers implement the program in their classrooms. Prior to joining Lexia, Alexis worked as a speech-language pathologist and reading specialist in both public and private school settings. Alexis earned her undergraduate degree in psychology from Bowdoin College and a master's degree from the MGH Institute of Health Professions. We want to again thank our presenters and welcome them. Today they'll be talking about a recent study that they did exploring blended learning approaches in early elementary grades. With that, I will go ahead and hand it over to our presenters.
Great, thank you so much, Justin. We're really happy to be here and really looking forward to sharing our work with you. So first thing I want to let you know is that Lexia has actually been around for more than 30 years. Our company was founded to create a phonics-based reading program on the computer for struggling readers back when computers were few and far between in the private space and personal space. And now it's just, I'm so proud and very excited to be a part of this company that has now a program, Lexia Reading Core 5, that covers 7 grades of material for students for all abilities in pre-K through 5th grade. And we've grown so much with now 2.6 million students who learn with Lexia all around the country and around the world. So very briefly, and Alexis is going to be going into this in more detail later, but our integrated model for Lexia Reading Core 5 consists of students working independently on the computer online, and their performance is summarized and highlighted for the teacher to log in through a teacher portal for them to have that ongoing data, for them to drive instruction. So then offline, they can have targeted instructional experiences, and we provide resources to help boost students' skill development. So when they get back on the computer, they're applying those skills. And you can see it's a cycle and a process that continues all year. Really, the goal of our program is to really support the teacher, to help them change students' lives. We know that when students come to school, from birth to 5, their experiences range quite dramatically. So even as early as kindergarten, teachers are facing a group of students with a wide range of abilities. And this This graph is from Lynn Fielding, who studies student growth trajectories across the K-12 lifespan of the student. And what he finds is that students tend to stay in the same band, in that same trajectory for across all those years. So when they start school behind, they often end school behind. The goal of our program is to really change students' trajectories, help students who are on level stay on level, and help students who are below grade level advance in those bands to catch up with their peers. Our research and our method for integrating student online performance, student online work, which used to be called computer-assisted instruction. And if any of you go to these articles, you'll see that's what it's called back then, computer-assisted instruction. But really how we've evolved from just students being on the computer to really this full process of blending online and offline instruction. And that's really brings us to the article that we're going to be talking about today, which is truly a blended learning approach. And this population was low SES students and focused in the early elementary grades. I want to take a moment to give a shout out to my co-authors, Paul Macaruso, Elizabeth Kazikoff, and Elizabeth Brooke. So I'm going to pass this over to my colleague now, Alexis, to talk to you all about how we define blended learning.
Thanks, Rachel. So again, before Rachel talks in more detail about the study, we thought it would be helpful to talk a little bit about blended learning and what our approach at Lexia is toward blended learning. Blended learning is definitely a popular and a big buzzword in education these days, but in our experience, we found that it can mean different things to different people. And it can also mean very different things when we're thinking about elementary students compared to older students and in higher education. This slide just highlights some of the key terms and key words that we often hear when we hear definitions and discussions of blended learning. So some of these may look familiar to many of you that are with us today. It's often described as individualized or self-directed. It's data-driven in some definitions. So those are some words, again, that we often hear in relationship to discussions of blended learning. Here, I just wanted to share one very commonly used definition of blended learning, and that is from the Clayton Christensen Institute, and their definition states, blended learning involves leveraging the internet to afford each student a more personalized learning experience, meaning increased student control over the time, place, path, and/or pace of his or her learning. And again, when you think about elementary school students, a lot of that is relevant, but there are parts that are not as relevant, such as the time and place of their learning. A second definition that we've also came across here at Lexia is from Bonk and Graham from 2006. And this definition stems from their research in corporate education and higher education, but it brings up an important fact, and it's that blended learning combines face-to-face instruction with computer-mediated instruction. And what stands out about that definition is that blended learning is not just students using the computer and working independently using online activities, but that it's actually, blended learning actually combines that experience with face-to-face instruction. And that's exactly what we do in our programs at Lexia. This slide, again, just highlights that key that to us at Lexia, blended learning really means integrated. It's directly linking the computer-mediated instruction, so directly linking what the student is doing through their online individualized activities, and teacher-led instruction through meaningful resources and data that can help drive that instruction. As Rachel showed earlier, this is an overview of what our model looks like for our program, Lexia Reading Core 5. So just to describe in a little more detail what the student experience is like and what the teacher experience is like when using the program, this model really highlights that. So at the top of the screen, you can see the student is working independently on activities. They begin the program at a level that's just right for them. They take a brief placement test at the beginning of the program, and they're placed at a level that fits their individual needs. As the student works through the program, all of that information and data is recorded and sent to the teacher and administrators in really easy to read and understand reports. And as part of those reports, we also include targeted recommendations for intervention. So we point out where students are struggling, and then we also provide teachers with the resources to help target those challenging areas for students. This slide highlights the scope and sequence that we target in Core 5. And again, students can place at any level in the program. So you may have a second grader that needs to continue to build their foundational reading skills. So based on the placement, they may start the program at level 2, which is a kindergarten level. You may also, in that same class of students, have a second grader that is working above grade level, and they may place at a later level. Level 13 is a grade 3 level, or even up to grade 5 skills. So again, we're really able to personalize and individualize the instruction for each student in the class based on their own individual strengths and needs. We're hoping to show a quick video. I know, Justin, were we able to get this up and running?
Yeah, I can go ahead and pull it up right now.
Okay, before we play it, I just wanted to share just a brief 10-second video that shows an activity in the program, just so you can get a sense of what the student experience is like and what some of the feedback is that exists in the program.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Justin. So as you can see by that short clip, that they're really targeted activities and a lot of rich engagement and motivation built into the activities to help all of our students, especially our students that might be struggling with some of these foundational skills. There's a second video, and Justin, we don't necessarily need to show this one, but this is just another example of what a different activity looks like. This activity is an idiom activity for some of the older students that focuses on language comprehension and understanding abstract language concepts. So again, the same sort of motivation and engaging features exist all the way through the program. This slide highlights our instructional model in Core 5. So the video clip that I showed a student that was successful answering that particular question in the program. However, when students struggle, we have support and scaffolding built into the program, so we can provide instruction and support as soon as the student begins to need it, or as soon as the student begins to struggle. So this is just a high-level overview of what that looks like. You can see at the top is the standard level of the program, where the student is sorting multiple meaning words. If they have difficulty with that task, we branch to guided practice, and the task is now becomes more scaffolded for them. Instead of 3 words, the student sees just 1 word on the screen. And the final step to this, again, if the student continues to have difficulty, is our instructional phase, where the student receives immediate instruction in what is that particular concept. So in this case, the definition of the 2 meanings for the word bat. Along with this instruction that's built into the program, the teacher is also notified that a student is struggling with a particular skill, and specific resources are recommended for the teacher to use for that face-to-face instruction as well. As I mentioned and Rachel mentioned, MyLexia is the site where teachers can go and access this really rich data and reports on their student. And this slide is just an overview of all of the different reports and the types of data we're able to capture and share with teachers. So again, really powerful information and data on progress in the activities, progress over time, and again, a way for us to link this progress to resources for the teachers. And that's what I'll show next. So this is an example of the plan instruction list, which identifies all of a particular teacher's students that might be struggling in a certain concept in the program. So here you see a list of 7 students that need instruction in 6 different skills. You can drill down to each particular student and see even more detailed information about that student. So here you can see that Addie is struggling with long vowel teams and see more information on that. And then the teacher can also access an instructional plan or a lesson plan right through that report. And this is the instruction that is recommended that the teacher deliver, again, in that face-to-face, hands-on way. This is an overview of what the lesson looks like. So a lot of instructional language, activity ideas, again, to provide that face-to-face instruction so the student can then go back into the program and be successful working through the tasks independently. In addition to lessons that are recommended in the program, we also recommend skill builders or practice activities that help us or help the students strengthen and build and generalize skills outside of the program. So in addition to the teacher resources for instruction, we also have additional student practice activities that also, again, strengthen and reinforce the skills that they're learning independently. Before Rachel talks about the study that involved Core 5, this is just one visual of how Core 5 might work and look in a classroom. So this is a center rotation model that is pretty typical in elementary schools. But here we've tried to highlight the different components of the program. So to the top left, you see the students working independently on computers. You can see the teacher pulling students aside. It's a large group, but it's probably reality in many classrooms to have that many students working in a group with the teacher. So there's where you might see our lessons being used to help support the students that are once they go back into the program. And we also see opportunities for collaboration and peer work as well. And that is where our skill builders and some additional resources that we have available to teachers are typically used.
Great. Thanks so much, Alexis. Before we actually move on to the study itself, does anybody have any questions about the program? We're happy just to take a moment and answer any questions if anybody has any questions about the program or the materials.
And if so, I think the best way is to enter them into the chat.
Yep, enter them into the chat. All right. Well, if something comes up, we'll be sure to keep our eye out and fill you all in as we continue to talk about the study and what was done in the study. All right. So this study was conducted during the 2012-2013 school year with first and second grade students in a low-income urban school. There were 88 students. 95% of them had classification of free and reduced lunch, just to give you some context there. There was a random assignment by classroom within each grade. So we had, I believe, 2 classrooms per grade, and the students, the classes were randomly assigned to be treatment group, which means they received Lexia, or a control group, and those students did not receive Lexia. So almost even there with 47 treatment and 41 control students. In addition, we had a couple of ELL students that were identified, 14 in the treatment and 7 in the control. So we were able to do a small sub-analysis with those students to learn a little bit more about the context around ELL students and Lexia Reading Core 5. So maybe it wasn't super clear earlier, but I just want to take a moment to point out that this is a program that's intended to be used for the full year, the full school year. So for all of our studies, we do a full year of research. So in this case, it was October through May. And students used the Core 5 online activities, and we saw a great video of that earlier. Teachers used the reports, and also Lexia lessons were provided. This was really early on in Core 5's life. The skill builders were not yet available during this study, but they'll certainly are included in future studies and current studies that we're doing. The measure that we used was Pearson's grade, which is a group reading assessment and diagnostic evaluation that has multiple subtests that get at students' vocabulary skills and comprehension skills. Students were pre-tested before they started using Core 5 at the beginning of the year, and were post-tested at the end of the year, at the end of the school year. In addition, we interviewed teachers and we conducted observations of students using computer both in the classroom and in the computer lab, just so we could really see what was going on with our own eyes and learning from teachers about how things were working and what was going on. The first really great thing that we learned is that students were able to make really great advancements in Core 5 during that October to May timeframe. And we were also able to look at to see how many minutes per week the students use the program. They're different based on their different risk levels, to see how much they were able to progress in 1 year. And one thing that you can notice is that light blue section, those are all of the students who advanced into the next grade level of material. So these are all of the second graders who were able to finish all of the second grade material, for example, and finish finish the school year 1 year above where they started. Now, in addition, another small group were able to complete actually more than 1 year, 2 or more years of growth in just this one school year. So that's the 11% who started one grade level below and the 17% who started in grade level. So this was really exciting to see a group of students were able to actually complete 2 years in one in the first year that Core 5 was out. Now, here are the outcomes. So here we go. What happened in terms of the students who use Lexia versus the control students in terms of their total test scores on the grade? So what we like to use in our studies is the standard score. And just to give you some context, a score of 100 is perfectly average. So that's right in the middle of student skill abilities is 100. And it's standardized across grades, so you can combine grades and be able to compare students from different grades all at once and look at different groups of students to see how much they've grown and changed. So what was really exciting, as you can see from this graph, is both groups of students made gains from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, but really that Lexia group outperformed the control group, and that was statistically significant that their gains on the grade were higher than the change in the control students. And all the students on average ended the year above that 100 average score mark, which was just really, really exciting. As you can see, they started below that 100 mark. So that really gave us a really great sense of how the program could impact student learning. And then we were curious for those two subtests, the vocabulary and the comprehension test, which subtests really contributed to that growth. And we saw that it was actually the comprehension standard score. So it was actually the comprehension skills that were really had higher gains in the Lexia group, and that's what contributed to the total test score. So as I mentioned right at the beginning of the talk, traditionally Lexia was a phonics-based program, and this was the first program that really covered the depth and breadth of the 5 strands of reading plus structural analysis to help aid in helping build students' comprehension skills. So it's really exciting to see that the comprehension subtest actually was the driver of the overall test change. We mentioned that we had some information about our ELL students and non-ELL students. So when we're thinking about using Lexia as a treatment for intervention for ELL students, we were curious how the ELL students did compared to the control group non-ELL students, to kind of give us a sense for what the program could look like and what kind of outcomes we would have for an ELL intervention. And what you see here is the pretest. This was a really, really big difference between our non-ELL control students and our ELL treatment students. And across the year, through all that scaffolded work that Alexis showed you and all that explicit instruction, we actually were able to erase that gap. And those ELL students gained, on average, the 20 points to be above average at the end of the year. So this was really exciting and encouraging. As you recall, though, just 14 students and 7 students in each group. So this is really going to be a focus and is a focus for the work that we're doing right now. And we already have, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that as I wrap up the talk. So as we discussed, we talked to the teachers. We saw the students as they were using the program. And our conclusions and our discussion about this, we really tried to think about, well, what was it about this particular blended learning model that led to the kinds of gains we saw with these students? And so our suggestion is that effective instruction involves, first of all, clear goals for the student. Alexis didn't have a lot of time, but there's so many different ways in the program where we are motivating the student and providing information around their progress and their progress monitoring and their goals. To have content that is explicit, systematic, and scaffolded with immediate modeling and corrective feedback. You saw one example, but also even across those 18 levels of the program, pre-K to 5, there is truly explicit and systematic scaffolding of the way the information is presented and organized in those 18 levels. Next, familiar instructional routines. Having that rotational model, students knowing what group they're in and where they go and how they function, it reduces their cognitive load and it really helps free up that brain space potentially for deeper learning and its skill building. And the last thing is for the teachers to have a venue and an insight to have ongoing monitoring of student performance. So we're really excited, and we continue to research how our program hits all of these different parts of effective instruction. And one last thought in our discussion we had about ELL students is it can be kind of easy for an ELL student to be quiet in the classroom. And one thing about working on online activities is that digital component really forces the students to respond. And that may be a particular benefit for these students who may not be interested or willing or comfortable participating verbally out loud in the classroom, in front of everyone. So other thoughts in our discussion is, the benefits of blended learning in early grades, and certainly especially for low-income students and ELL students. And overall, it's really encouraging that both groups made substantial gains. And both groups had the same amount of instructional time and had a really great core curriculum. But those structured additional supports helped bolster the reading abilities for those Lexia students, especially those high-need Lexia students, to help them close those gaps. The main limitation, of course, as I've mentioned already, is a relatively small sample size in a study. So we're really excited. As you saw, 2.1 million students, so hopefully we're going to continue to do larger studies and also use our program data for all of those students to help improve the program in real time and make it better for teachers and students all around the world. Next steps, we have a larger scale ELL study that was very specifically looking at how ELL and non-ELL students moved through our program and their progress on a progress monitoring tool, AimsWeb. There are almost 1,000 students in that study, and that has been submitted for review for publication. We have 2 manuscripts that we're finalizing right now on K-5 blended learning that also focuses on sub-analyses for ELL and non-ELL students. And then right now we're concluding data collection on a 2-year elementary school longitudinal study of blended learning that also includes ELL students. So we are very, very busy over here at the Lexia research team, continuing to continuing to just help understand how our program is affecting student change. So for more information about Lexia and the reading curriculum and the assessment products that we have available, please feel free to visit our website, www.lexialearning.com. And any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us about the program or this study to research at lexialearning.com. Thank you very much. Head over to you, Justin.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for a lot of great information and just the insight around the study itself. I want to open it up, make sure we have some time for our attendees to maybe ask some questions as well. I have a couple questions. I'm wondering, obviously you're trying to use this research to tie some of these positive outcomes back to elements of the program, and especially like programs, elements of the platform. But how involved is Lexia in kind of like implementation, I guess you would say, in working with teachers to implement the program itself? And then how might you tie some of those positive results back to a practice like that of working with teachers in implementing a blended learning platform like that? Things that might not necessarily be specific elements of the content or of the software platform.
Sure, Justin. This is Alexis. I can try to answer that. We're fortunate at Lexia to have a huge team of implementation managers that help support many of our schools. So the implementation manager works closely with schools and teachers to do what you just said, to help figure out how to make it work in their classroom. Again, the online part is pretty easy. You need a certain number of computers and a certain number of devices, although that can be challenging too, just making sure that infrastructure is set up for success. So our team of implementation managers really go in and help make sure that those pieces are solid, as well as making those other pieces work and providing strategies to help those other pieces work as well. We also create through our team, both the research team and the educational content team, we have a number of resources that we provide and share to all of our teachers about how to make Lexia work and how to make it fit best into particular classroom models. But again, it's definitely an important, critical part of using the program.
Yeah, and some things that I've noticed over time, just to be more program neutral, is when we're talking about online time. Okay, yeah, so the statistical significance. Okay, I can get to that in a second. So we're talking about online time. We want to think about the quality of that time as well as so not just the quantity, but also the quality of that time. And the other thing that we talk a lot about with school districts at the district level is thinking about school leadership and accountability for monitoring data. And different people do it different ways, but at least having some clear expectations for accountability and expectations around what fidelity looks like and how fidelity is going to be monitored, observed, and implemented and accounted for. So these are all things that are, can be decided in the details by the district and by the school very specifically, but overall these are some good things to think about when approaching online learning in the elementary space.
Does that answer that question, Justin?
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the additional insights there. Looks like we have a question from Junga here on the some more detailed information you might be able to provide around how you test the statistical significance within the study.
Yeah, so I actually just need to check my references very briefly about that. So I'm going to need a moment to come back to that question if there are any other questions.
That's definitely a Rachel question. I can't help with that one.
Yeah, I just need a moment to refresh my memory.
Sure, that's great. Well, I guess in the meantime, maybe one of you can talk a little bit about, so you mentioned some of the next steps and some of your studies that you're looking at conducting into the future. Can you talk about, so in this study you used Pearson's grade as kind of like your focal metric, I guess you would say. Can you talk about maybe some other assessments you might be planning to use in some of your forthcoming studies?
Absolutely. So one of the big challenges in working with school systems and research at this kind of like in this day and age is the students are already tested a lot, and kind of the last thing a district wants to do is enter a relationship, any kind of partnership where the students are going to be tested more often. So what we're trying to do right now is, thank you, Lexia research team. I was hoping you'd jump in on the chat. Thank you. So one thing we're trying to do right now is talk to schools about what tests they're already giving and they're already using, and then entering a data sharing agreement with us. And then the research partnership can use the data that the schools are already collecting as part of their educational goals. So often these include progress monitoring tools. And right now we actually do this work with not just our research partners, but also just customers and districts all around the country who are interested in this. Some examples are Dibbles, AimsWeb, STAR, MAP. There's one that's called STEP that we've done recently. And we're using all of those for both work around correlations between how those measures are kind of assessing students and how Lexia assesses students, but also even using those to look at how students are comparing from beginning of year to end of year, their scores on those measures. Yeah, so the grade unfortunately does not have a fluency score or a fluency subtest. And that's kind of like the nature of doing a group administered test. We didn't have, a timed reading component to the program, to the assessment. So that's something that certainly we're going to keep our eye on. And and again, because the teachers and schools may be doing oral reading fluency assessments, that's something we'll have access to as we continue these partnerships. And those different things come out. And certainly because our program doesn't have an oral reading component to its instruction, we have a silent reading component. It's really important and interesting for us to be researching how the silent reading relates to oral reading fluency. So it's definitely something on our list for sure. I think that answered your question about the tests. So great. So the Lexia research team provided the link, which is what I just pulled up myself, which is just so handy. So the actual full research article is available for free to read and download and share if you'd like. So that's kind of a nice thing. It's funny because in our work, we're trying to look for research all the time, and it's not always the case that the full article is available. So it was really nice. So all the details are available.
Yeah, we definitely want to encourage our attendees and folks who are watching this at a later date to go back and read the full study as well. Just want to mention too that we host a research clearinghouse, and I'll type the URL to that as well. It's k12onlineresearch.org. And there you can find basically a listing of citations from a lot of different peer-reviewed journals. We also have white papers and some other working papers from different organizations. But you can find a whole list of research, and as a field, I think we're kind of trying to move toward that idea of being able to find freely available research, and so it's definitely a benefit for this study to be freely available too, and we will make sure to include it there. It looks like Catherine has a question. Catherine, did you want to jump on the audio to ask your question?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? I didn't test out my mic ahead of time.
Sure. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you both, everybody on your research team, for being here and taking the time to present for the community today. We really appreciate your time and efforts. So I'd like to ask one question about how, with the schools that you work with, how do you share back your results with those schools to impact their practice?
That's a really great question. So one of the things we always try to do is, so actually this is interesting, I can bring this up. So Alexis mentioned the implementation support staff, those implementation managers. So there's actually a very specific detailed plan that is executed when a school is assigned an implementation manager, and we call it the implementation support package. And it includes a variety of events, such as creating an implementation plan, having phone calls we call it success metrics phone calls, where we monitor the school's progress towards their goals in implementing the program with fidelity. And as well, it includes specific training events, such as a launch training and a data coaching training, and also potentially training on how to use the offline instructional materials. So the final event is it's called the Success Metrics Call 3, for lack of a better name. And often that is that end of year, how did everything go talk. And what we try to do is, at the very least, present the progress that the students made in Core 5 to the treatment students or the treatment schools, if there's more than one school, at the end of the year. And then we try to get back in the fall for a little presentation to give them at least preliminary results for what happened over the course of the study in terms of treatment and control groups, or ELL students versus non-ELL students, and things like that. We speak to our leaders and liaisons to our research schools quite often. So it's really part of not only an ongoing conversation, but we also like to have some sort of presentation or a report for the schools and districts that were involved as well. I just want to say one thing about the statistical analysis that was used. So in this particular study, we used one sample t-tests for the treatment and control. However, I just want to point out that the manuscripts that we're working on right now are actually regression analyses, and we use ANCOVA analyses, so a much more sophisticated type of analysis and statistical plan and analysis plan, in part due to the size of the study, but also the nature of how many students are in the subgroups, and the nature of the tests that we used, and things like that.
Great, thank you so much, Catherine. Does that answer your question? Do you have any other follow-ups based on those answers?
I will give the mic over to someone else if they have another question. I might have another one soon.
Great, so we'll take just another minute or two here to see if anyone might want to pose a question in the chat window, and if Catherine wants to chime in at any moment, she can go ahead and do that as well. But again, we want to thank our presenters so very much for coming and sharing their research, and we really look forward to the research that's forthcoming as well. Before we wrap up, we just want to mention a couple things that our own institute is doing. We have a couple initiatives that are ongoing here at MVLRI. We have our podcast series. So podcast series, we're looking at interviewing folks all around the country who are using research to inform their work in K-12 online and blended learning. Very short podcasts, typically 15 to 20 minutes, pretty consumable. You can find all of our episodes at that URL there. They're hosted on SoundCloud. You can also find them in the iTunes store as well. If you're interested in being a guest on our podcast, please feel free to reach out to us. You can find us at our handles listed there, and I'll put up some more contact information soon as well. We also have a guest blogger program where we invite researchers and other folks who are using research in their work to come and write about what it is that they're doing. So if you're interested in using our blog as a platform to share your own insights and work, please feel free to check out that link as well to see what that initiative entails. We want to make sure we advertise our upcoming webinar. It's actually not our webinar. It's being hosted by another division or program, I guess you would say, within MVU called Mentors Matter. So our Mentors Matter program is really focused on how we can leverage face-to-face mentoring and relationships with students who are taking online courses to improve student performance. And that initiative is leaning on a lot of the research that's been done here in our institute. Give a shout out here to Rebecca Stimson, an author on our Mentoring Fundamentals Guide, and a lot of other mentor case studies and different research around mentoring. But we will be hosting Julia Freeland Fisher of the Clayton Christensen Institute, who has started to look at this topic a little more in depth and has some preliminary research findings to share with us at this webinar. So if that sounds of interest to you, please check out that Eventbrite link there and register for our webinar. That'll be May 19th at 3 p.m. So click the link there to get full details on exactly what we'll be chatting about. And finally, please feel free to stay in touch with us. Before I go through this, though, it looks like Catherine does have a quick follow-up question. Of course, Catherine, we have time. So go ahead and pick up the mic and ask your question.
Sorry about that. I know I'm slow to the draw today. So again, thank you so much for presenting. I'd like to ask about, we at MVLRI like to make that connection between researchers in the field and programs and vendors like y'all. So do you invite external researchers to help you in any way? Like if you have a project that people could help out on, how would anybody get in touch with you? Is that an option? And if you can give more details on that, if maybe you've done it in the past and give an example of that.
Yeah, such a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. So we love engaging with the research community on this topic. There's so much changing so fast. Really, we just have to learn from each other. Absolutely. research@lexialearning.com. Just email us if you're interested in, if you're doing some research and you around this topic and you want to bounce off ideas. We're happy to bounce ideas around. Really, and like I said before, so let me tell you a little bit about who the partners that we are working with right now. So is it the University of Iowa, or is it the Center for Reading and Research in Iowa?
The Iowa Center for Reading Research.
Thank you. Iowa Center for Reading and Research. We actually are partnering with them on a huge summer program they're doing this summer, looking at blended learning versus pen and paper learning. I think it's over 100 sites all across Iowa. We have the University of Maryland is partnering with us and the DC Public Schools, or I should say they're partnering with each other, and we're giving support on how to research blended learning in the literacy space. It's so exciting, and we've talked to them about these topics: quality of time, quantity of time, school leadership, teacher engagement. How do all these things kind of come together in the moment, and how it impacts students' outcomes? Yeah, we're also working with a state initiative with the whole state of Utah, and we are working with some evaluators there, looking at how not only our program, but they're looking at how many different programs are impacting K-12. This is focused on all students in kindergarten and first grade, so it's an early intervention grant, and also students in second and third grade who are behind. And then for 2 years, we actually were part of the Kansas Reading Initiative, and we have a variety of papers that we put together with the results from that program. We were looking at students' impact over 2 years of time, looking at students in Kansas of all abilities, and that's grades K to 5. So those research briefs are on our website as well. So those 2 state initiatives, Kansas, which was 2 years and finished last year, and Utah is in progress right now, and you'll be seeing us starting to write about what happened in Utah shortly. So
Great.
yeah, absolutely. Get in touch with us if you're interested in this topic. We love talking to other researchers.
Yeah, we will obviously be sure to share out that contact information that you gave out as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. We do want to encourage communication with our own institute too. So if you have some feedback for us about any of our initiatives, including our webinar series, feel free to reach out to us. You can reach us at mvlri@mivu.org. You can sign up for our mailing list by clicking the link there. A quick little form to fill out, and you can be subscribed to our mailing list where we send out information about not just the work that we're doing, but other work that's going on more broadly in the field. We have our Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn accounts where you can follow us, see our goings on there as well. And you can find our YouTube channel at youtube.com/MVLRI1. There you can find all the recordings of all of our webinars from this research webinar series, and you'll soon find the recording of this webinar as well, likely within the next 24 to 48 hours. So we will encourage folks to check that out. And then finally, check out our webinars page on our website at mvlri.org/presentation/webinars. You can see all of our upcoming webinars as well. With that, again, we want to thank our presenters. Thank you so much to the research team at Lexia Learning, Rachel and Alexis. We can't thank you enough for coming and sharing your work with us.
You're welcome. Our pleasure.
Great, we enjoyed it.
Yeah. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.